When something horrific happens, the internet never forgets, except when it does. Sometimes tragedy leaves no trail behind. No video, no audio, no final record that it ever happened at all. Every recording erased, every copy destroyed or sealed away by someone who decided the public was never meant to see it. And the reason is always the same. What was captured was too disturbing, too violent, or too heartbreaking to be released into the world. Today, we are getting into the horrors of lost media. Not creepy cartoons or vanished TV shows, but real footage tied to real tragedy. Moments so dark they were buried and quietly forgotten. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into it. Clear Man. One of the more popular, long-standing reality TV shows is also a brutal one. You may have heard of it. Survivor, a show that debuted in 2000 on CBS, a show where contestants are thrown into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They have to find food, shelter, and form relationships with other contestants to avoid getting kicked off. The members all compete in mental and physical challenges, where winning provides them immunity from elimination. The last man standing takes home $1 million. The show has aired 50 seasons since 2000, but that's just in America. There are actually around 40 adaptations around the world, but not all adaptations have been successful. In 2009, Pakistan decided to jump on board and create their version of Survivor. It was set with an all-male cast, and while produced for Pakistani television, it was to be filmed in Thailand. The show was sponsored by Unilever, a huge Pakistani company that produces and sells personal care products. Wanting to market their new shampoo brand, which went by the name of Clear Shampoo, they named the show Clear Man. Interesting name. Apparently, the winner would be given the title of Clear Man and presumably prize money. I couldn't find how much the prize money was, but according to the internet, there was prize money. I hope it was substantial so the winner got more than just that title of Clear Man. But there was one man who wasn't interested in the title or the money. Let's meet our first contestant, Saad Khan. Saad signed up for the show not to win something, but for the challenge. He was living a pretty normal life in a quiet part of Pakistan. He worked at a bank, went home to a wife and 4 young kids. Everything was routine. The prospect to flying to Thailand, living in the wilderness, competing against other men, it was exciting for Saad. He was a family man who wanted to see what the world had to offer, and he felt ready for any challenge the show gave to him. Saad gave it his all. He quickly became very popular on the show, many of the other contestants becoming good friends with him. They were actually quite sad when Saad was eliminated in episode 4. Members were challenged to successfully throw a basketball into a net 10 feet above the ground while standing on an ice block. This proved to be difficult for Saad, and after his failure, he was sent home. Or so the other contestants thought. Nobody knew that producers had actually put Saad up in a hotel near the filming location. And for episode 10, they sent Saad back for a final appearance, a last chance at redemption. His friends on the show were excited to have him back, happy to have their friend back competing with them. They thought the final episode would be another fun challenge. But producers had different ideas. For the final episode, contestants were asked to run through a fiery path, swim through a pond, and climb a rope, all with a 15-pound bag of sand on their back. Which feels insane to me, but I digress. Now let's not forget, Saad went on to Clear Man for the challenge, the thrill, the adventure, and that he was given. It was a hot day. The contestants stood there, sweating, waiting for the buzzer to go off. Saad was focused, ready for anything. He was going to claim that prize no matter the cost. The buzzer sounded, and he was off. He made it through the fire, going as fast as he could through the flames. Then came the pond, which contestants believed was not very deep, so Saad felt safe entering the water, even though he was exhausted, slowed down by the sandbag, and he was doing a great job making his way across the water, determined to make it to the other side. But then he started to backstroke. And this is when his friends noticed something was wrong. Saad started to sink, and he panicked. He cried out for help, scared, desperate for someone to get him. Others yelled out that he needed to open his backpack, remove some of the weight. But Saad had pulled a muscle, and even worse, a strap from the sandbag had gotten tied around his ankles. And as he was sinking deeper into the water, splashing and trying to stay afloat, he couldn't get himself free. And just like that, he was under the surface. Other contestants jumped into the pond to try and save him, but the water was muddy. They had no idea where he was. And even worse than muddy, it was deep. Whatever the producers said about the pond being shallow and safe, it was a lie. As the other contestants were desperately looking for Saad, the realization sunk in. They had been lied to. After 10 minutes of tirelessly trying to find Saad, lifeguards finally arrived on the scene, and Saad was pulled out of the water, but he had already passed away. Everyone was in shock. What was supposed to be an adventure turned into a tragedy. A tragedy that no one wanted to take the blame for. The spokeswoman for Unlever made a statement denying that Saad's death was the company's fault. And although major news outlets in Pakistan were suspiciously slow to report on the tragic death, which most believe was Unilever allegedly actively paying people hush money, bloggers and independent journalists were quick to spread the story to try and get justice for Saad. Teeth Maestro, a group of bloggers, gave an opportunity for another contestant to share his perspective and opinion on what happened. When asked about safety precautions, he said, quote, "No, there was nothing present over there. We are given the surety that the pond is not very deep, and there was only first aid help in case of injury. No professional divers, no lifeguards, and no snorkelers. We only realized after this incident that during the 10 episodes, a similar incident could have happened with any of the participants, as precautionary and safety measures were non-existent. We never thought on these lines, maybe because of the comfort level we had on the big brand organizers, managers, and sponsors which were associated with this show. I wish Saad would have remained eliminated in order to avoid all what happened. Negligence and carelessness was the cause of Saad's death. What happened to Saad was preventable. He could still be here. If only the production company or someone from Unilever, anyone at all, took the extra time to make sure these challenges were safe. But they were more focused on making money, on filming dramatic content that would sell. It didn't matter if the contestants were safe, they needed to sell their shampoo. Because of their negligence, a father and a husband lost his life. So was anyone held responsible? Did anyone do any jail time for what happened on Clearman? Well, maybe someone would have if all the evidence hadn't disappeared. Not just the footage of Saad's death, but the entire show. Not a single episode from the show saw the light of day, which may be for the best. I wouldn't want anyone in production to make a cent. But it does leave some very unnerving questions. What were the other challenges? Was there anything else that was overtly dangerous that the company doesn't want us to see? Were the producers throwing these people into life or death situations without them realizing? And why did they lock up the footage? Was there, anything revealing or incriminating on that footage? Saad's family thought so. They requested to see it, but the request was denied. Why? Was there something they wanted to hide? Further evidence that Saad's death was on their hands? Well, I guess we'll never know. The other challenges were probably just as dangerous. And because of the lax legal protections in Pakistan, not a single person ever saw jail time for the incident. Hopefully, Saad's family receives justice in some way, because either the production company or Unilever, or better yet both, deserve to be held accountable. Daniel V. Jones. On April 30th, 1998, everything was normal as usual in Los Angeles, California. The weather was perfect spring weather, not too hot, not too cold, The people of LA were living their everyday lives, enjoying the sun, out and about, perhaps going to the park or taking a hike. But on the way down LA's highways, navigating heavy traffic, some may have been interrupted, stopped by a man in crisis. At around 3 p.m. that day, Daniel Jones parked his truck on a transition loop on the Harbor Freeway and prepared for his final moments. Daniel was 40 years old, spending his days in Long Beach, California, working maintenance at a hotel. He lived a quiet life with his Labrador in a 2-bedroom bungalow, tucked away in an alley along the coast. But his simple, peaceful life came to a halt when he had received terrible news. Earlier that year, Daniel had encountered some health problems, among them a flesh-colored growth on his neck. Hoping for the best, Daniel went to the doctor, but he walked out of that doctor's office distraught, hopeless, and not sure where to turn. Daniel was diagnosed with cancer, as well as HIV. At first, Daniel went through the options. It didn't seem as if there were many, but he wanted to give it his best shot. The problem was Daniel was a low-income worker. His job as a maintenance worker, while exhausting and backbreaking, did not put him in a great financial position. He couldn't afford a premium healthcare plan. What he could afford was an HMO, which was a pretty terrible plan to have in his situation. HMOs can be okay for some, but usually for people that typically just need preventative care. Something like cancer and HIV, these things require specialists, appointments months in advance, medical equipment, things that are hard to get with HMO insurance. All of the options that Daniel needed seemed out of reach. He felt helpless, like the world had abandoned him. Even if he wanted to put up a fight, it wasn't just the disease he was up against. It was money, doctors, health insurance. It felt like too much. So on a warm April day on a Los Angeles freeway, Daniel was parked with nothing but a shotgun and his dog, preparing to commit S-word, hoping people would watch in the process. He wanted the world to see what it had done to him. He began by pointing his shotgun at drivers that passed by him, terrifying innocent people on the road. This garnered some attention, prompting people to call the police. It wasn't long until Daniel himself called law enforcement. He wasn't trying to hide, he wanted a scene. During the phone call with 911, he fired off his shotgun multiple times, making it clear that he was serious. He was a danger to himself and others. He talked to the operator, venting about his diagnosis, his insurance, his fate in the hands of doctors he couldn't afford. All of it. I'm not happy with what's happening to my situation, and I'm going to draw attention to it whichever way I can. My paramount goal is for no one other than myself to get hurt. Soon enough, the freeway was shut down. Law enforcement began to circle him, helicopters monitoring him. He had wanted a scene, and he got it. Now that all eyes were on him, he began to give them something to watch. He got out of the truck, walked across the empty highway, and put out a banner he had made for this event. The banner read, "HMOs are in it for the money. Live free, love safe, or die." In these last moments, not only did Daniel feel angry, but trapped. With these diseases, he couldn't be free. I'm not sure what love safe could mean. The speculation could really be endless, but I think it's clear he felt his freedom had been stripped. And now, he thought there was no reason to live. And now that he had shared his message, he went back into his truck, took out a Molotov cocktail, and the truck went up in flames. He stumbled out of the driver's seat on fire, but somehow he managed to pat himself down, peel his pants off, and survive the fiery explosion he created. He was visibly confused, walking around in pain, disoriented and in a daze. Not only that, but angry. He knew the world was watching, and he was pissed off, enraged at the American healthcare system, at the police, at everyone that got to live a life free of disease. Staggering around the freeway, he made obscene gestures, presumably towards the cameras he knew were capturing his every move. He was almost finished. The show was almost over. He looked out over the freeway, down below at the ground, thinking about what that jump would do. But he decided against that. He got off the ledge, went back to his truck, and pulled out his shotgun again. Walking a few feet away from his truck, he leaned the shotgun on the median, put the muzzle underneath his chin, and ended it all. The cameras captured every detail, and the scene was broadcasted onto live television. The helicopters, filled with reporters, were circling Daniel, watching a man's tragic last moments. It was what Daniel wanted, but it feels so wrong. Live free, love safe, or die was his last words. We'll never hear any more from him. Whatever more he had to say was lost forever. At least it would have been, because there were tapes found afterward. At one point, while he was walking around the freeway, he took a bag from his truck and threw it over the wall. Once investigating the scene, police found the bag, and inside was a videotape. All we know of the videotape is that it was some sort of last note from Daniel. All that was made public was that he said, quote, "I'm not going to fight the disease. It has affected my neurological system. I'm not going to end up crazy. I'm a dead man. See ya." The rest is gone forever. I don't know if the police destroyed it, gave it to the family, or it's locked away. But I doubt the general public will ever see it. But it feels like Daniel wanted us to see that. He was in pain. That much is obvious. But his S word was more than just that. It was an outcry, a declaration that he was furious with the way he was treated, that everyone, including him, deserved a chance he didn't feel like he had. Maybe the tape was only made for family and friends, or maybe he had something more to say to us all. His death was supposed to be a message, and I can't help but wonder if there was more to the man we'll never get to see. I hope, for their sake, his family got to hear his final words he recorded on tape. Mackenzie House. For some people, ghosts only exist in movies. The idea of spirits floating around is nothing more than entertainment. Creaking sounds in an old house, running faucets when no one is home. Well, there's a reasonable explanation, but others will argue that some things are just unexplainable. They hear a distant voice from across the room or feel a cold tap on their shoulder. Well, I don't think anyone will know for sure until they cross over themselves. But for the people of Toronto, there's one big mystery still unsolved. In 1958, William Lyon Mackenzie moved into a two-story brick house on Bond Street in downtown Toronto. For all of his adult life, he was a government man, serving as Toronto's first mayor. But he was ousted when he tried to overthrow the Canadian government. Fighting for Upper Canadian independence from Great Britain, he lost, got arrested, and was exiled to the United States. He lived in New York and worked as a journalist. He was actually almost arrested again for violating US neutrality laws because he was literally forming an army to go fight the Canadian English. Again, he was arrested, this time for 10 months. But that's how passionate he was about Canadian independence. 11 years after his exile, Mackenzie was pardoned, and he returned to Toronto. Once again, he joined the Legislative Assembly of Upper Canada, which is basically the Canadian Congress. He ended up resigning when he decided the government was basically full of it. Nothing had changed, and he'd better stay out of politics. So there he was, starting a new life in his new house, hoping to leave his tumultuous past behind. But very soon after moving in, his health started to decline. Now, Mackenzie was a stubborn guy, so he refused to take any medication. And without medical care, William passed away in 1861, just 2 years after moving in, dying in the comfort of his own home. A home that some wanted to preserve, a monument to honor the memory of the city's first mayor. So William's grandson, William Lyon Mackenzie King, decided to take on that responsibility and make the home a historical site for years to come. His grandson became the Prime Minister of Canada in his first job in office, turning his grandfather's home into a museum. William's grandson hired live-in caretakers to work in the house, responsible for maintaining the museum. Starting out, the caretakers went about their job as normal, cleaning and maintaining the home, enjoying the routine of a simple job and free housing. But this wasn't like any house they had stayed in before. The Mackenzie house was haunted. One caretaker, Miss Edmund, was woken up one night by a soft touching on her shoulder. Quickly opening her eyes, there was a lady standing directly above her, staring right into her eyes. But before she could process what was happening, the lady was gone. It was like she had never been there. Maybe it was a dream, she thought, a reflection, a splotch of light that happened to look like a woman. But then, just a few weeks later, Miss Edmund jolted awake from another tap on the shoulder, and there she was, the lady, staring again, but this time, before she disappeared, she slapped Miss Edmund across the face and vanished. And it wasn't just Miss Edmund that was seeing things in the Mackenzie house. Bruce Beaton, a historical interpreter at the house, was in the home one night when he noticed the printing press operating by itself. But that's not all. A tourist of the museum shares their experience. Quote, "I went to the Mackenzie house 14 years ago, and to this day, I have never forgotten my experience there. I went with my father and sister just to get a feel for Toronto history. I remember walking in the door and saying to the tour guide, before she could say anything to us, 'Who died in this house?' She stated that William Lyon Mackenzie had more than likely died in the house, but there had never been proof of it. Then, as I was going up to the second floor, I had a weird sensation come over me. I looked to the second room and I saw a young girl, early teens, standing by the dresser. I was convinced that it was his daughter, and the name Elizabeth kept popping into my head. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is because I'm not sure if it was my overactive imagination as a young teen myself, or if it was real. I've experienced many things in my time, but I've never quite been sure if it was just my imagination or a gift. Another thing about the Mackenzie house was the basement, where the kitchen is located. That room just freaked me right out, even from the outside. Enough people were having weird experiences in this house that in 1960, right before the home was bought by the city of Toronto, CBC got a reporter and an archdeacon from the Church of Holy Trinity to walk through the Mackenzie house and perform an exorcism. All of these odd sightings, strange feelings, taps on the shoulders, there was something living in William Mackenzie's Toronto home, and this archdeacon was gonna rid the house of it. The CBC reporters set up their cameras, and when they were rolling, the archdeacon began to pray. They walked the entire home, reciting prayers, blessing the space with holy water, trying to exorcise an unruly spirit, and then the ceremony was done. And finally, the house was quiet. A lot of reporters claim that nothing odd has happened since, and that's sort of true. Nothing like Miss Edmund's experience has happened. But that doesn't mean nothing weird has happened. Someone on a ghost tour says, quote, "I have the Ghost Meter Pro, a handheld EMF reader. It's interesting going upstairs into Mackenzie's bedroom. I didn't pick up any activity, but when I proceeded further to the left-hand side of the room by the front windows where people have claimed to have seen activity from outside on the street, it went off and hit maximum capacity on the meter itself. The meter also went off downstairs by the kitchen area near the front window. People have witnessed movement here, shadows from the street, and things like that through these windows. So I would say the ghost meter is quite accurate." I know some may think that the EMF is a load of nonsense, but I personally have some crazy experiences with it. Honestly, this person's memory of the Mackenzie house sends shivers down my spine. So, are there still ghosts in the Mackenzie house, or was it ever real to begin with? There are supporters on both sides of the argument, and everyone asks the same question. What about the footage? What happened during the taping of the Mackenzie house? I described a little bit of the exorcism, but what actually happened? Was there any paranormal activity? Was anything caught on tape? Well, it would be helpful if we could see the footage, but it's been lost for decades. I don't know if it's destroyed or just forgotten, but it's gone. Lost to the public, never to be seen again. Whatever prayer that archdeacon said, whatever he performed, we'll never be able to see it. We'll never know what happened that day. What we do know, though, is that after the exorcism took place, the building was turned over to the city, and with it, an old list of all artifacts in the house. At the bottom of the list, one chilling item. One ghost. Exorcised. Hopefully, whoever wrote that got their wish after the archdeacon's visit. And if a ghost did exist in the Mackenzie house, it's finally put to rest. And I just wonder what was on that footage and where it is now. Fred and Rose West. Sometimes there are stories so tragic, so horrific, and so gut-wrenching, they seem too heartbreaking to be true. It's hard to believe what people are sometimes capable of, especially when they do so over and over again. Hurting family members, innocent children, assault, murder. It's hard to believe what monsters like this are capable of. Fred and Rose West are two of those monsters. Both Fred and Rose came from troubled and traumatizing childhoods. Growing up, Fred was assaulted by both his mother and father in brutal and horrific ways. This was true for Rose as well. Her father abused her, and it only got worse when her parents divorced. But the abuse didn't end with them. As Fred and Rose grew, they continued the cycle themselves. Each had a history of assaulting their younger siblings. Rose was especially devious, and Fred developed a history of assaulting girls from his neighborhood, something he freely admitted to. Quote, "Doesn't everybody do it?" They met when Fred was 27 and Rose was just 15. They met at a bus stop. Rose was actually turned off by him at first, but Fred was persistent, and the more attention he gave her, the more she began to like him. It was clear they had a lot in common. They both enjoyed making people suffer, having power over someone, and hurting those around them. The two began to date. Despite disapproval from Rose's parents, by the time she was 17, Rose was pregnant with her first child, Heather. And from there, their sick and twisted family began. In 1972, 2 years after Rose had their first child, the two married and moved into a 3-story townhome in the center of Gloucester, England. In 1971, Fred was arrested for petty theft, leaving Rose to take care of the children. Although Rose only had one child, Fred had 2 other children from previous marriages, Anna Marie and Charmaine. So Rose was left alone with 3 children, while she herself was only 18. It seems like such an innocent age, full of potential, eager to be a part of the world, but Rose was far from innocence. Without Fred around, tensions were high, and Rose was unable to keep her true nature, her violent nature, contained. These poor, sweet girls were forced to bear her sadistic temper. They were forced to maintain most household chores, and if they misbehaved in any way, they were beaten and whipped. Charmaine was the oldest of the 3, as well as the most strong-willed. Only 8 years old, she was brave, a daredevil. She wasn't scared of Rose. She believed that her biological mother would come save her, and until she did that, she would stand up against her evil stepmother. She was up against a monster, though, and there's only so much a little girl can do. In June of 1971, Rose had enough of Charmaine's behavior. She couldn't beat her into submission, so she wanted to get rid of her. Forever. Shortly before Fred was released from prison, Rose murdered Charmaine. She then waited for Fred to return home from jail so he could finish her job. He buried his daughter's body underneath their kitchen window. How could someone be so evil, so despicable? I could honestly make a whole video, maybe 2 videos, on the next 14 years of their lives. The two ended up murdering at least 12 young women, including their daughter, Heather, though some speculate there may have been as many as 20. It's truly disgusting the deeper it goes. I mean, these two are some of the most prolific serial killers in the history of the United Kingdom, and that title was earned. But what most people don't know, there's more than just the physical abuse, the violence, the murder. They also had an insatiable, perverted nature. A lot of the West's lives were built around fulfilling their perverted needs. After moving into their house, the two took the opportunity to make the second floor a brothel for Rose to sell herself. This wasn't just an opportunity for the pair to make extra income. Rose's intimate drive was endless. She had a former lover, Catherine Halliday, who shared that Rose would frequently complain that she was never truly satisfied. Despite having intimate time with really anyone she could get her hands on, it was never enough. Fred wasn't much different. He didn't mind Rose's need to sleep with other people. In fact, he loved it. Their house was essentially designed for them to have intimate time as much as possible. Their bedroom was designed with an intercom system, so Fred could listen in on Rose with her clients. There were also peepholes set up so he could spy on her, often without the other party's knowledge. At this point, they have 8 children they need to take care of, but Mom, if you can even call her that, was upstairs selling herself. Clients are coming in and out of the house, and Dad is listening, doing God knows what. 8 young children living in the den of their parents' fantasies, forced to hear and see things a child should never see. And the West didn't want to keep their gross business private. They wanted publicity, exposure. So Fred purchased a video camera and began to film their intimate escapades, usually Rose's work with clients. Sometimes he would openly record with the client's consent. Other times, the camera would be hidden. If it sounds like they were proud of the content they produced, it's because they were. Fred often bragged about what they made, eager to show others. This is where things get scary. Fred would frequent an adult film store, often trying to sell the tapes to them, hoping that they would be interested. And not only were they not interested, they were freaked out because Fred wasn't making normal adult content. Fred was insistent he had access to darker films. He said he could get legitimate films of women being beaten, tortured, or murdered, and he could because he was making them. Catherine Halliday shared that during her time with the Wests, she remembers watching some of the tapes, but she doesn't remember them being simple adult films, but rather deeply dark. They were often graphic, violent, with women who seemed forced into situations. And who knows how many? We know the people he murdered, we know the names, but there are countless others on those tapes that remain a mystery to us and law enforcement. But not only that, he would boast that these films didn't just contain him and Rose or other lovers, clients, and other consensual acts. He claimed they contained footage of his daughters. So not only were they child murderers, they were predators too. I know these are evil people, and it shouldn't be too shocking. Like, these two are infamous for a reason, but it still just makes me beyond sick to think about. Fred and Rose obviously weren't in the business of just selling themselves out and making adult films. They were disturbed, vile monsters who brought their children into their disgusting life. There will never be 100% certainty of what was on these tapes because all evidence of them has been destroyed. They are gone forever. When the Wests were finally arrested in 1994, law enforcement seized all of the footage. There were around 100 tapes, not 10, not 20, triple digits worth of horror. And considering the murders, all the crimes committed by the couple, you might think police would want these tapes to help lock these people away. But no, they briefly looked over the tapes and decided it was mostly consensual acts and then destroyed them. All chances of possibly finding more victims, more incriminating proof against the West was gone. These tapes were key evidence, and law enforcement recklessly handled them, failing to bring justice to those harmed by these disgusting creatures. There was one tape that was not destroyed, however. It was a collection of multiple assaults, spliced together into one sick, sadistic mixtape. In early 2000, it was found in the house of a predator. I guess some of Fred's efforts to distribute these tapes were successful, and this tape in particular contained footage of Rose harming her children. When law enforcement found these, they said, quote, "We are interested to find out who the girls are. It has always been thought the West were involved in the abduction and murder of more young women and girls than was ever proved. Fred West spoke of more than 20 before he committed S-word. So it is important to find out who the girls are on the film. They may have been murdered. Most of their victims were in their teens, but we are now wondering if they could have been involved in the abduction and murder of small children." It's almost as if the footage Fred filmed was important evidence in the case against the West, but for some reason, no one thought this when they discovered the hundreds of other films. But regardless, what happened to the Wests? Well, despite there being no physical evidence of the West committing harm against minors, their children testified that there was in fact a terrifying amount happening in the West household. In court, Anna Marie, the second oldest, testified that she'd been brutalized by her father her whole life. According to her, Rose facilitated the whole thing, afterwards telling her, quote, "I'm sorry. Everybody does it to every girl. It's a father's job. Don't worry, and don't say anything to anybody." I can only imagine that's the tip of the iceberg for Anna Marie and all of her siblings. Thankfully, their parents were arrested in 1994. Fred was charged with 12 murders and Rose with 10. Like the coward he is, Fred unalived himself before his conviction, but Rose was given a life sentence. Both of these monsters would be gone forever, although that pain will be carried forever. When Anna Marie was 35 years old, she had been so exhausted, so worn down from the weight of all that she endured, that she tried to get rid of it for good. Sadly, 5 years after her parents' arrest, the pain of the abuse she endured was too much to bear. She attempted to commit S-word at the Westgate Bridge in Gloucester. Thankfully, a bystander saw her and firemen arrived in time to save her. She recovered from the incident and today is still living with the memory of pain they left her. After her attempt, Anna Marie said, quote, "People say I'm lucky to have survived, but I wish I died. I can still taste the fear, still feel the pain. It's like I'm going back to being a child again. I have always had to be strong, but I'm not. I'm really scared."